Hi, welcome to Unforgotten Reels, where fear doesn't need a name to be real. It grows with every glance, every pause, every breath held just a second too long. Please subscribe to feel the slow burn. Hit like if the tension found you, and comment to tell us what left you uneasy. Our short film for today is entitled The Funeral That Never Ends. Hope you enjoy it. Let's start. Elliot opened his eyes to silence. He was seated in the front pew of a funeral home, though he couldn't remember arriving. The air clung heavy with the smell of lilies and melted wax. Before him, a coffin rested at the center of the room. He didn't know the man inside. The face was pale, unfamiliar, almost unfinished, as though it had been carved only for this moment. The mourners surrounding him never moved, their gazes fixed not on the coffin, but on him. It felt as though the ceremony waited for Elliot alone. When he finally whispered, "Whose funeral is this?" No one answered. Then the corpse twitched, just a finger, but enough to make the lid creak against the hinges, as if it wanted to close itself, sealing something inside. Elliot blinked, and the scene was gone. He woke again, sitting in the same pew, staring at another coffin. The mourners were different, their faces changed, yet the silence was the same. This time, a nameplate sat against the polished wood, Harold Reeves. The name tugged at his memory. Harold, wasn't that his neighbor years ago? The mourners began humming, low and tuneless, a sound like an organ gasping for air. Elliot's breath quickened as the coffin began to tremble. The sound grew sharper, coming from inside. Something was knocking to get out, and then another blink, another shift. Again, Elliot found himself in the pew, his hands shaking. A third coffin stood waiting. The nameplate read Martha Ellis, his teacher, a woman who had once told him he would do great things. Now she was laid still beneath the polished wood. But the mourners had changed again. Slowly, their heads turned toward him in perfect unison, and in voices that did not sound human. But this time, he prayed it wouldn't. Another morning, another coffin. The nameplate this time nearly made him collapse. Daniel Harris, his best friend, the one who had stood beside him through everything. The mourners filling the pews were no longer strangers. Elliot tried to scream, but no sound came. His voice had been stolen by the silence. The coffin lid began to lift on its own, unbearably slow, until the body inside sat upright, and then it turned. But Elliot was beginning to understand. It was moving closer. Elliot ran, desperate to break free. But every door he opened only spilled him back into the same aisle, the same dim chamber, the same waiting coffin. This time, the nameplate froze him where he stood. Elliot Gray, his own name. The mourners leaned forward in unison, their necks cracking like dry wood. And then they began to clap, slow, hollow, like nails tapping against a lid. The coffin creaked open again, inch by inch, but the darkness inside revealed nothing, until his own voice came gasping out, a ragged, desperate breath calling from within the box, already trapped inside. His knees buckled, but the room held him upright, pulling him forward. The air itself seemed to grip his body, guiding him toward the coffin with invisible strings. The mourners rose from their seats, their jaws unhinged, wider than human mouths should, a humming chorus swelling into a roar. Elliot resisted, but his body betrayed him, forcing him to peer inside the coffin that bore his name. There, staring back, was himself, alive, eyes wide, mouth gasping for breath, hands reaching upward. The figure inside grabbed his wrist with impossible strength and pulled. Elliot was dragged into the coffin, and the lid slammed shut. Darkness. No air, only the deafening silence of soil waiting above. And then order returned. The mourners took their seats again. Their faces are blank. Their whispers are gone. The service began once more. At the center of the room, the coffin remained. The nameplate is unchanged, Elliot Gray. But where Elliot had once sat, the pew was now empty, waiting. The ceremony was never about strangers. It had always been his. And the question that lingered was no longer whose funeral it was, but whose would come next. The end. Elliot learned too late that the funeral had never been an invitation. It was a cycle. Each coffin, each name, a step closer to his own. We try to believe death belongs only to others, that it arrives in neat rows before it reaches us. But every funeral is a rehearsal, and eventually the ceremony calls our name. The funeral that never ends reminds us it isn't death that haunts us most. It's realizing some goodbyes are never over. Thank you for watching. Get lost in stories that stay with you. Subscribe, because ordinary isn't what we do. Which story stayed with you the longest? Tell us in the comments. We might turn your thoughts into our next film.